We've worked hard and made history many times. We've gotten this far because together we are tireless. That doesn't mean we don't get tired. It means we help each other continue on. And knowing one voice is strong, but the power of thousands or millions is stronger. We are the tireless, and together we will achieve gender equality.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Canadian Women's Foundation live chat with author Jessica J. Lee. My name is Andrea Gunraj, and I work with the Canadian Women's Foundation. So I'll tell you a little bit about the Canadian Women's Foundation. We're Canada's public foundation for gender equality. We support diverse women, girls, and anybody affected by gender inequality to move out of poverty, out of violence, and into confidence and leadership. This month, of course, we're really focused on the increased risk of gender-based violence. And this is a real concern in the pandemic context, and we want to do something about it. So I want to encourage you to actually listen to our current season of our podcast, All Right Now What, on this topic. And you can find that on our website, canadianwomen.org. And I'd also like to encourage you, if you're able to give this month, please give to our Out of Violence Fund. We're raising money to go towards our incredible organizations all over the country doing work in violence prevention and intervention. I'll tell you a little bit about that later on, but I just wanted to flag that for you right away. I want to introduce to you, before we bring her on screen, Jessica J. Lee. This is her book, Two Trees Make a Forest. It is a beautiful work of memoir writing. And Jessica J. Lee, she's been awarded the 2019 RBC Taylor Prize Emerging Writing Award. Her first book, Turning, chronicles her journey swimming 52 lakes in a single year. And it was longlisted for the Frank Hegyi Award for Emerging Authors. She has a doctorate in environmental history and aesthetics. Originally from London, Ontario, she now lives in Berlin. Actually, she now lives in England. She just moved from Berlin to England. And this memoir, Two Trees Make a Forest, recently won Canada's largest prize for nonfiction, the Hilary Weston Writers' Trust Prize for Nonfiction. And it's well-deserved. It's a beautiful, beautiful work. In the book, Lee navigates the relationship between her family's history and the geographical forces that shaped it. This is a quote: "Hers is a tale of political disruption, civil war, displacement, environmental ravages, and intergenerational trauma." And this was the Weston Prize jury that said this. She sets a speedy narrative pace, like a trained guide with nightfall looming, but she knows the value of slowing her stride so that readers can absorb the luscious vistas she's describing and the familial tragedy she is mourning. And I would say that it is definitely, there's a tragedy element to it, but there's a beautiful victory element as well too, and just a family groundedness that stunned me, and I enjoyed it so much. So you can buy this book wherever books are sold. And of course, support your indie bookstore. It's really important to do that. You can get it in audio format. You can get it in good old fashioned book format. You can get it in e-reader as well. So before we get started, if we get cut off, sometimes weird things happen in these live streams. Just hang tight. We're going to come right back on. Please add any of your questions below in the chat portion. And please don't click on any sketchy links that you might see. Sometimes people do things that are not right on social media. We don't want you to get into any issues. So please don't click on anything that you see, and we'll try to make sure that along the way we delete anything that shouldn't be there. So I'm going to introduce to you Jessica J. Lee and my colleague, Suzanne Duncan. Hello, folks.
Hi, Andrea.
Okay, so we're going to put it on to you, Suzanne. You have the first question.
Yeah. So Jessica, tell us where you are and tell us how you are.
I'm in London, England, in my living room. Here's my Christmas tree. I'm doing actually pretty well. I'm winding down towards what I'm hoping will be a quiet season so that I can hopefully write a new book. But yeah, I'm feeling like, this has been an interesting year, and it's nice to be able to have some quiet time to reflect on all the ups and downs, and mostly ups in my case. But yeah, it's been kind of wild.
Before I get to my next official question, I do have to ask you about your bookshelf behind you. This is something that I need to do. Tell us what's on your bookshelf. What's your favorite book on that bookshelf?
Ooh, So this is the books. Hold on, this is flipped. The books that are on this side, like on the side with the sofa, those are mostly my fiction books and my poetry. And on the other side with the tree, those are my nature writing books. I don't know if I have a favorite, although there are a few books I really liked this year that I can tell you about. There's Nina Mingya Powell's book, Tiny Moons, which is a sort of journal of a year eating in Shanghai, which is just, I mean, if you like dumplings, if you like, noodles, if you like, steamed buns, this is your sort of dream book. And then I've got this other one, which is actually not on my shelf, Speak Okinawa by Elizabeth Miki Brina, which is kind of like Two Trees, a story of a US American Okinawan author finding her family history. And so I'm really enjoying those, but I don't know if I could pick any favorites.
That's an unfair question. I know that. So I want to ask you, give us a no spoilers overview of what your book is about for those who haven't read it in your own words as the author.
So Two Trees is a sort of hybrid work of memoir, biography, nature writing, and history. And it traces the life story of my grandparents as they moved from China to Taiwan to Canada. And that sort of migration story. And that's interwoven with my own journeys in Taiwan, trying to connect with the place where they moved and where my mother grew up, and our sort of sense of connection to land and language and place. So it's a book that sort of tells a family story while also looking at the sort of larger scales, sort of the small scale of family and the natural world and the histories of sort of political change and colonization that have shaped Taiwan until now.
That's great, Jessica. And I want to congratulate you on winning the Hilary Weston Writers Trust Prize for Nonfiction. That's thrilling to see. Couldn't be more deserved.
Thank you.
And I'm wondering, how does winning an award for your book change the way you view it? Do you think of your book differently now that it's award winning?
I think, I really struggled with this book because it is a kind of strange book. And even when I try to explain it to people, I've struggled to do so. And there's a part of me that even when I sort of sent it out and I was like, okay, the book is done, I thought, this is a very strange book. And I wasn't sure if it worked. And so I think in some sense, the award is a really nice acknowledgement that it does work as a book and that it resonates with people. But I mean, an award like this, just in terms of the platform and the idea that it will reach more readers, particularly readers in the Taiwanese diaspora who perhaps just haven't seen themselves represented in literature in the way that I felt, I didn't see for many years. That is a really, I don't know, it makes my heart very warm to think of it reaching readers because of it.
And that's wonderful. And I'm sort of thinking a lot about memoirs because as part of this Tireless Readers Collective, we've been reading a lot of memoirs this year. We've read Eternity Martis, we've read Tessa McWatt, we've read Juliette Lalonde. All of those are very different. And I'm also noticing there's even more and more memoirs now. And I'm wondering if you have anything to say about sort of the shift that memoirs are going under, or are they even undergoing a shift at all?
So, I mean, I would say the thing that I've noticed this year, or at least perhaps maybe it's just in what I'm reading and what I choose, is we're seeing just so many more memoirs by writers of color, by women of color in particular. You mentioned Tessa McWatt as well. Like, I'm really excited by that. I'm excited to hear those experiences. And, I read a lot of nature and sort of place writing. We're seeing so many more women. And so that's really exciting to me. And, I think there's more room for books to be more literary or more, I guess, sort of, inconclusive, that they don't have to be, the straight up, search for salvation and to sort of reach a perfect conclusion, that we're creating sort of, more space for other kinds of narratives. I think that's really exciting.
I think your book is really one of my favorite reads of the year. I think the way that you use language in particular really stunned me, delighted me, just totally threw me for a loop in so many different ways, because I was just like, wow, to describe trees that way, to describe landscapes that way, that was really excellent. And the way that you describe Taiwan's landscapes and wildlife is so beautiful. These are places you had to hike and bike and swim through to even see. What was your process in witnessing in order to keep track of everything and be able to speak about it after the fact?
So yeah, I do have a pretty good memory for these things. So I would often come home and sort of, write the journey out from start to finish when it was fresh. But I honestly, I'm not a big note taker. So I would leave notes on my phone, in my notes app, or, in the voice memo. I would record myself notes, particularly if I was hiking. I would take pictures. But yeah, the notes I leave myself are kind of incomprehensible. It's always like rock, tree, leaf, moss, bird, which are useful for me as a writer, but probably completely useless if you really wanted to reconstruct where I'd been or what I'd seen.
I think as book nerds, I think all of us on screen right now are like certified book nerds, PhDs in book nerdity. I really want to know what you think about language. Now, you did mention in your book that language has become a home. Tell us what that meant for you as a trilingual, at least trilingual person with a really multifaceted family background.
Yeah, I speak 5 languages. I don't know what the word for that is. I should know it. I'm a writer. Multilingual. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, there's just so much familiarity in certain languages, and being able to come home in a sense to, Mandarin as a language. I'm not excellent at Mandarin. I gave it up as a child, and I dropped out of Chinese school, and I had to sort of go back and learn as an adult. And I think, being a writer, I have a sort of natural preoccupation with words and the things that are intranslatable or that, don't fully align. But for me, sort of leaning into that space in between languages, the space in between, what my mother might be trying to tell me and, the word she's reaching for and the word I'm reaching for. I like those gaps. I like those moments of possibility in language. So yeah, I sort of moving between English and Mandarin are big ones for me. Also German, and I wove all of those into this book and my first book as well. There's a lot of English and German, and so I feel like I'm always sort of in between and moving through languages. I don't know if that answers the question.
I think that answers it perfectly, Jessica. I want to shift gears and I want to talk about shifting. And you described Taiwan as a shifting place, and it's shifting on many levels. And I want to ask you about what does that mean seismically to shift? What does that mean historically to shift? And how does that relate to family history and sort of the shifting of family history?
Yeah, I mean, I think I came to thinking about this book, in sort of geological terms, partly because I had so many fragments in my grandparents' story, and there were so many sort of seismic shifts in their life story, and so that seemed like a sort of easy metaphor to fall back on to start with. But the more I sort of sat with it, Taiwan is geologically a very young place. It's like 7 to 9 million years old, and the landscape is constantly shifting. There are earthquakes every day. There was a really big one yesterday. The landslides, just the effects of wind and water. All of those things are, I just think, more immediate in Taiwan. And so for me, as someone who spends time looking in the landscape for stories of non-human nature, but also to reflect on sort of the human stories I wanted to write about, it gave me a sense of sort of instability, a sense of not being able to find easy answers, of, the terms constantly moving, which actually reflects the history of Taiwan sort of politically and culturally in many ways as well.
And this is also part of this landscape of Taiwan, mountains. I love mountains and I fear mountains. I think I'm not the only one. And it really strikes me, as I was reading the book, I was thinking mountains mean so much to so many different people all over the world. Communities all over the world have really interesting and unique relationships with mountains. So tell us about the mountains you talk about in this book and what do they represent?
So there are a few different mountains that I spend time hiking through in this book. some high mountain ones, some sort of foothills, sort of some in central Taiwan, some in the north. For me, I think, there's this real tendency to want to sort of turn the mountain into a metaphor, right? And I think in working on the book, I was constantly struggling against that impulse, which I think it's something we see so commonly in nature writing and place writing and in mountaineering writing, this idea of conquering the mountain, conquering the landscape and getting out into it and, finding some clarifying moment of insight. And of course, I'm human. I'm not immune to that kind of impulse. But what I wanted to do was sort of trouble that for myself. And so I spend a lot more time, moving through the mountains and not really reaching a peak or struggling to reach a peak. And when I do reach the peak, I will say the weather conspired always to prevent me from having that great view of the landscape and all of the clarifying insights I think you could hope for. And that for me was far more instructive. To be able to say, okay, I need to sort of really look at the journey. I really need to look at the gaps. I really need to look at the small things, the mosses, the birds, the trees, the small shifts in elevation and what that teaches me about what's happening in the landscape. And so that was really helpful in some sense, and also taught me a lot about, when I was mining my sort of family story for meaning and for answers, that, you don't always find those things. And sometimes those gaps are just as important as the answers.
That is the perfect segue into this next question. What really stood out for me were the stories of your grandparents. And it reminded me that for those of us who get to know our grandparents and meet them, we still only see that small slice, and there's still so many gaps there. So tell me what surprised you about your grandparents' life while you were researching and while you were writing about them.
I think, the big thing that sort of stood out to me, particularly in my grandfather's story, was that, so I had this sort of handwritten memoir of his that was in a letter. And it told me more of him than I'd ever known. He would quote famous philosophers and poets and classic Chinese literature. And that for me was just not something that I ever experienced in my day-to-day exchanges with him, which were so perfunctory in a way, so familial and familiar, right? It was, he would make me my favorite meal, or take me to, McDonald's for a Happy Meal or whatever it was, right? It was those sort of small moments of tenderness. We never talked about literature. I don't think our language gaps would have enabled that. So it sort of revealed to me just, the richness of the life that he lived and who he was. And that was really exciting. But yeah, I struggled throughout the book to answer a lot of questions. My grandparents' stories, because they were part of the generation that left China and went to Taiwan after the end of the Civil War, and then, lived through martial law there. Most of the sort of records I would need are still under closure. And it was really about being able to say, oh, I actually may not get every answer I want. And at what point am I going to be satisfied and feel like I know my family and that I know their story? At what point have I learned enough to feel connected and to account for the past?
Folks, I want to encourage you to ask any questions that you have. And there's a great question I need to ask right now. I think it's related to this one that you just answered. How did family members react to the book?
So the only family member that I let read the book before it came out was my mother. My mother has been extraordinarily generous. She gave me my grandfather's letter when she found it to work with for the book, and also just answered every ridiculous question I had while writing this book, and helped me translate things, and checked my Chinese and all sorts of stuff. So I'm really grateful for that. And my mom, I think, she did say to me at one point that she felt like in some way it was a very sad story, and she didn't feel that my grandparents' story was as sad as I perhaps feel it was. And that for me was an important observation, because it taught me a lot about perspective and memory, that my mom just has so many more memories of her parents than I do, so many more happy memories. And I guess it underscored what we have as grandchildren to sort of hold on to, and the idea that within families, we're going to see things differently sometimes. But yeah, my mom has been super generous with allowing me to write this book. And I keep promising now I'm going to like stop writing stories that are like based on my mother's life. But yeah, my family's been really, really supportive and really generous.
So wonderful. Thanks, Mom. Oh my gosh. What would you do without your mom helping you kind of unearth that story? It's really amazing. Okay, so I have a question about where you're living now. So you're in England right now, you were living in Berlin, and you grew up in Ontario, and you wrote about Taiwan. So you're clearly a woman of planet Earth. And where are you longing to travel when you can travel again?
Oh, I mean, I would like to, once it's possible to travel, I want to go home. I miss my friends in Toronto, and my mom's in London, Ontario. My dad's in Florida, but I want to see my family. My sister's in London as well. And I would like to get back and see everyone. But if I could go on like a trip, I think I'd go to Taiwan. I was meant to go earlier this year and that got canceled. But yeah, watching my friends in Taiwan sort of carry on life as usual there, because things are quite good. It's been very envy inducing.
So Jessica, you are an environmental historian. I don't know anything about that. Could you tell us a little bit about what that means? I feel like having read the book, I have a deeper appreciation for what that could mean, but what does it really mean?
Well, I mean, it could mean a lot of different things depending on the environmental historian you're talking to. I sort of got into this kind of work. I originally studied philosophy, and I studied environmental aesthetics and sort of aesthetics of landscape, why we would think a certain kind of landscape is beautiful, and the history of those ideas of sort of beauty in the landscape and the sublime. And then I came into history, because I liked looking at that long view, and I like environmental history as a discipline because it is interdisciplinary. Perhaps it's like not quite a discipline in the sense that it sort of really, I think, draws in a magpie-like way from so many other disciplines. So, in my own work, I've used sort of ethnography and bits from anthropology, looks at literature for storytelling, traditional historical methods like archival research. And so all of those things sort of come into, I guess, how you might tell a multidimensional story of place that's not just, human history. It's not just the history of this war or this battle or this government, right? But rather a story of non-human nature and how, together with human cultural forces, we sort of co-create places and how sometimes nature pushes back. Taiwan's a really great place to write about that because there is just so much pushback, literally, from the landscape tectonically and sort of in terms of climate. And yeah, so it's sort of, what I like to think of as the best way to do vibrant place-based storytelling.
All right, so we're going to wrap up soon with these formal battery of questions that we are just getting Jessica to answer. But I want to know, before we move on to our fun lightning round questions, tell us about upcoming books or writing projects that you're working on nowadays.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I'm just sort of winding down now, hoping for a quiet period so I can start working on my next project, which I'm still sort of not really talking about hugely. I'm trying to write the proposal, but I'm interested in small things. I want to write a book that doesn't necessarily take me on grand journeys, but asks me to look more closely at, the water where I go swimming in the river, or fungal spores that are affecting trees in my neighborhood, and just sort of small details in the natural world and the stories behind them.
That's beautiful. And I am so excited to read that. I love grand stories, but that minutia of every day and the stories behind that, just amazing. So Andrea said we've been giving you a barrage of questions. Just wait, Jessica. Here comes the real barrage.
Okay.
So I'm going to do a lightning round with you. I have a whole bunch of different questions. Let's get started. Okay, deep breath. When's the last time you had a belly laugh and why?
I think it was probably because I saw something really stupid on TikTok, and I look at TikTok in bed before I go to sleep. It's my guilty pleasure. I don't recommend it to anyone. You'll never get any sleep. But sometimes every time I get belly laughs, it's like as I'm meant to be going to sleep, and my husband's like trying to go to sleep next to me, and I just start laughing. And he says I do this like ridiculous like dog villain cartoon laugh that's like like really like in my throat, and I'll do that for like once it starts I can't stop.
I think that's trying to be courteous, isn't it? Like that's a quiet laugh.
I'm trying to contain the laugh, but it's coming out.
Okay, Jessica, what's the best advice you ever gave a writer?
That I've ever given a writer? Read your work out loud. I think that was what was told to me and what I tell everyone, mostly because I think if you read my writing, I'm obsessed with rhythm. And if you don't know how the sentences sound all together, and if you can't find that moment where your body moves with it, something's missing. So read aloud. Beautiful.
What's your ideal writing environment? Tell us about your setting. Tell us about your snacks, your drinks, music, silence, maybe. Is it morning? Is it evening? What makes it perfect?
So I guess for the most part, I am a coffee shop writer. I really like to write with my headphones in, but in a coffee shop, I usually like to pick one song that I play on repeat for the entirety of writing a book. So, this book had one song that I played on repeat. My previous book had like one song that I played on repeat. I wrote this book almost entirely in the sort of coffee bar window bar of my local coffee shop in Berlin where I was living. I had a seat that was in the corner, didn't get too much sunlight, and I would have 2 cups of coffee and 1 croissant. And the time it took me to consume those was my writing day, and that was it. And I just did that for like a year, and this is the book. Is it okay? I haven't found my new one. Like I haven't found a new cafe since I've moved, and I'm really struggling. Literally, I don't know what to do.
Would it be wrong to ask you what the song was?
It is. So it doesn't have a name in English. Actually, maybe it does. One second. It's by a band called Cicada. And it was like from a soundtrack to a Taiwanese movie. So Cicada's a Taiwanese contemporary chamber orchestra. And the song, I think the English name is Before the Sun Goes Down. And it's mostly instrumental. There are words to it, but I just listened to that on repeat. It's in Mandarin, and it was good to sort of find a rhythm.
That's amazing.
I would have been so interested if you said it was Nickelback, but okay. Cool.
I don't know. What kind of book could be written to Nickelback?
The most epic book ever written. Come on.
What's the best book you've read lately?
Ooh. Well, I mentioned this one earlier. I just finished this one actually, so I will say it's Speak Okinawa. Where's the center? Yeah. I read that recently, and it's amazing. I don't think it's out yet. It's coming out soon. And then Bestiary by Ming Chang is one of my favorites of this year. It's really, really good. Also, if you want to lose yourself in beautiful sentences and just kind of like spellbinding, I hate that word, but like truly this word applies, spellbinding writing, that's the book.
What's a book that's on your list of must read, but you haven't gotten to it yet?
I have a couple. Let's see. I've got so I've just started this one, Hunter School, which is it's an English translation of a Taiwanese author. And I've had this sitting on my desk for ages, which is an English translation of a Taiwanese author, but I've never read The Stories of San Mao, Stories of the Sahara by San Mao. She was a really famous Taiwanese writer. And this is the first time the English translation just came out recently. And so I really need to start it, but this year has not been good for reading. I haven't finished many books this year.
Oh, really? So I know some people have like dived all the way in. I have a stack this tall of books that I've gotten through, and other people just can't read a single word at all. I started and not finished 90% of the books I've tried to read this year. And it says nothing about the books, but it's all about my attention span and my TikTok addiction. I think we're getting to the heart of it. So what are you binge watching other than TikTok?
At the moment, this is embarrassing. So at the moment, I'm binge watching Designated Survivor. It's filmed in Toronto, so I really like Toronto. Yeah. But I really love watching like kind of mindless television. I could do it all day. I never watch documentaries. I never watch intellectual TV. I think because I spend my days with books, I spend my days thinking. I really like to watch like crime stuff, or I don't know what else. But I'm also really, I'm getting into like Christmas movie season. So I watched that on the weekend. That was really, I enjoyed that.
Is there a holiday movie you can't live without?
Well, there's the Muppet Christmas Carol, which I insist on every year. But also my family has this weird tradition that every Christmas Day we watch The Family Stone. Which is kind of a quirky choice for the family Christmas movie. But I think because we're sort of blended family, and I don't know, we just started watching it one year, and we sort of turned it into a tradition. And now, no matter where we are in the world, we all watch it and text each other and FaceTime and stuff. And so that's an essential one.
Nice. So if you could have 3 people, alive or dead, that you could be talking to through the pandemic, they could move into your house, be part of the social bubble, who would those 3 people be?
Do they have to be like important figures, or can it be just like friends, or?
Totally could be friends.
Okay, let me think. Does my husband count? I already live with him. He's in my bubble already.
He counts. Your dog and your husband count. Andrew has different opinions, but
okay. If they're already in my bubble, let me think. Can I just like pick my mom and my 2 best friends?
That sounds perfect.
Rachel, Alyssa, and my mom.
That sounds perfect and honest.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to have intellectual conversations with my favorite writers all year. Like, I just want to watch Mean Girls with my friends.
Perfect.
Oh, I totally agree. So we have some questions from the audience. We're going to put these forward to you right now. Okay, so you did mention that 90% of the books you didn't quite get through this year. What book did you get through that you felt actually helped you with this pandemic reality that we're living in?
I to go back to the one I mentioned earlier, Tiny Moons by Nina Mingya Powell's. That book was really just a wonderful escape for me because it's so sensory. It's really short, and it's food focused, and there was just a real joy in getting to sort of travel in words, but also to, I guess, preoccupy myself with dreams of things I want to eat. And I keep rereading it this year because it's so soothing in a way, and just so beautiful and light and nourishing.
I like food. Okay.
I like food also. Food is really
the food is what has been helping me. I mean, it's so important. Oh my goodness. We vilify food, but it has been helping me, I must say. And even thinking about food, planning food, what you're going to eat after a boring meeting kind of planning.
My pantry is like my guilty pleasure, and probably where I spend all of my money.
It's going into your body. Spend money. I think it's fine. Jessica, it's fine.
I've learned I'm a food hoarder. I've got stashes of food all over the place. Like, this is a secret cupboard of my chips. This is where I keep all my tomato paste. It's
you know how many noodles I have in my house, like and different kinds of noodles. It's bad.
Okay, here's a question that is a serious question. What's the most rewarding part of writing this book that you wrote, Two Trees Make a Forest, and what was the most challenging part?
Yeah. I think when it comes to just the sort of rewarding part of writing it, I mean, at the end of the day, it was extra time I got to spend with my grandparents, and, not sort of in a real life way, but I spent, the years I was working on this book just sort of in my head having conversations with my grandfather and with my grandmother, and that was a real blessing. And, I remember really vividly on the day that I finished the book and sort of hit save and sent the manuscript off, I burst into tears because I was like, oh, that's done now. It felt like a funeral somehow. And neither of them had funerals. So in a way that, was kind of appropriate. But yeah, that was probably, the bit that perhaps meant the most to me. Being able to see it come together and actually reach readers who have told me, that they felt the same way about their family, or, they're also in the Taiwanese diaspora and they, wanted to feel more connected. To hear from that sort of portion of the readership has been absolutely the biggest joy. And then, was the other one challenges in writing?
Yes. Yeah.
Challenges. I really struggled with structure on this book. It was really hard to structure because, because it was a book of gaps. It was a book of unanswered questions. And how do you structure a book that's like about the holes in the story, right? It's like trying to cover yourself up with a blanket filled with holes. That was something I struggled with a lot until I really sort of let the landscape lead me, and really leaned into, the bits that I couldn't answer. Yeah.
In the earlier portion, when we were talking about your book with a smaller group of people, one of the questions that we asked was around this idea of unanswered questions. A lot of writing, as you mentioned, is about coming to like a clean narrative, and it's like a straightforward line and character, and realization and this is not that book. Tell us about why it was important for you to uphold the authentic journey, which has a lot of questions and doesn't end in a place that, you have an awesome realization, but it still was allowing the landscape to lead you.
Yeah, I mean, I think if there was a text I modeled it on, in a way, it was, other than sort of books that inspired me, I was looking at my grandfather's letter a lot, and he wrote his life story in this letter as he was developing Alzheimer's, and so it repeated itself. It had gaps, and it's not a letter that ends. There's no ending or sign off point. It literally stops in the middle of a sentence, in the middle of a story. And that for me was kind of instructive, because I thought, okay, this sort of cyclical character, this character of sort of fragments and repetitions, that was something that I could also use in structuring this book, and in a way that was, for me, more reflective of what life is actually like, right? Like I would go out into onto the trails, into the mountains, and go bird watching and stuff. And I'd say, okay, I'm going to have this sort of linear experience, and I'm going to come back, and I'm going to have experienced the thing I want to experience and have the questions I wanted answered. And I would cycle back, and I wouldn't have the view, I wouldn't have the answers, and I would go out and do it again. And I liked this idea of sort of constantly treading over the same territory, in a way, sort of metaphorically, and using that as a sort of, I guess, guiding principle in how the book should be structured and how I would write it. And also, in Taiwan, the landscape, as I said, it's sort of ripe with interruptions, with fragments, with, just things that don't work out. And in a way that really helped me.
We're almost coming up to the end of our time, folks. If you have any other questions for Jessica, please go ahead and put it in the chat. But I do have a question about a particular lake that you spoke about, recently made lake. Tell us a little bit about that. That was so fascinating in your book.
Yeah, so towards the end of the book, I visit a place called Shuiyang, which is, in the sort of, in the Alishan Mountains in Taiwan, in central Taiwan, where the cedar and cypress trees are these like 1,000-year-old, size of a house, enormous trees. And in 1999, a massive earthquake diverted a river stream and flooded one of the cedar forests there. And so this lake is a newly created thing that's just sort of in the middle of the mountains and the forests. And it's this lake filled with sort of standing dead cedar trees, which are now, of course, coming back to, the trees aren't coming back to the life, but there are ferns and mosses, and there are loads of other things and grasses, growing up from the trunks and from the edges, and, birds that populate this area. And so there's this sort of beautiful moment of destruction and then newness. And yeah, it's just one of the most eerie and haunting, but also exciting and sort of brimming with life places I've ever been. And yeah, I spent a night sleeping there, hiked in and then hiked out, and it was just incredible.
Did you get to swim in that lake?
I did. I did. So I did just before leaving. It was raining the first day when I got there, and I thought, oh, this is grim. And we were really cold after hiking, and my friends and I. And it's a place that's quite popular among hikers in Taiwan. So there were a lot of other hiking groups on the opposite shore. And, my friends were like, don't swim. It's going to embarrass everyone. And swimming in Taiwan is not something that is done as freely as we might in Canada or elsewhere. A lot of people don't know how to swim. So I would get sort of chided a lot by my aunties for going swimming all the time. But I snuck in a swim just before I left because I couldn't not. And Oh, it was magical. Swim out into the middle of, amidst these old standing, hundreds of year old trees, and, to see the sun creep over the hills. It was just incredible.
Jessica, the way that you talk about nature in the book and the way that you're talking about nature right now, it makes me so deeply nostalgic. Like I've been locked in the city since March. I love city living, but it's not my natural go-to place. And I'm just wondering how you are keeping connected with that naturalness and that sort of heart-fillingness of those trees that's swimming when you have to be confined to an urban environment.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm lucky in that I have a dog. So actually, even when we've had lockdown periods, I am allowed to go out because I have a dog and he needs to be walked, which has been really beneficial. Where we're living now, we're really lucky to live in a bit of East London that's right next to sort of all of this protected nature preserve land and parkland, like literally right at the end of my road. So that has been really nourishing. I can get out into the green from my road and I could walk for hours. I think I could go for 25 miles and not touch a road, which is really incredible. But yeah, that's been really special. And I swim a lot. I swim everywhere. At places I'm not supposed to swim, I swim. I swim all over. But I go up to Cambridge sometimes for work now. And whenever I do, I make a point of going swimming at Grantchester Meadows in the Cam. And that has been magical because there's never anyone there. And it's December. So the mornings are frosty and there's low light and I can get into the water and there's mist and just me in the river. And that's been amazing.
So fantastic. Jessica, we are coming up to the end of our time and we want to be respectful of your time, but we could talk about this for hours because just learning about your view of landscape and living vicariously through your illegal swimming is just giving me a lot of joy right now. So thank you very much for spending your time with us. Thank you for writing this gorgeous, gorgeous book. And thank you for just being an amazing voice in literature. We do have to read everything you write now.
Thank you for having me. It's been so nice to speak to you today. So thank you.
Wonderful. So folks, I just want to give you a sense of what we're up to now and give you the opportunity to please follow us, like, share, all the things that you can do to just be in touch with us. We want to know you better. We want to hear from you. So I would like to encourage you to just, of course, leave your comments. We will get to them at some point and we'll be able to answer them about this book. And remember that this book, you can get it at your bookstore, your local bookstore. We really encourage that. But of course, you can get it in lots of different formats as well too. You can get it in book format, you can get it in ebook format, and you can get it in audio format as well too. And I believe the audio format is read by Jessica herself. So you get to hear her soothing voice when you get to listen to that. And I just want to encourage you to think about the things that we're up to right now. We're really focused on violence prevention and intervention. We know that in the pandemic, violence has had a spike in risk, and we really need to do something about it. So we're really focused on the Out of Violence Fund that we run at the Canadian Women's Foundation. And this money goes to violence prevention and intervention services and programs all over Canada. What I love about our violence programs is that it really focuses on stopping violence before it starts and also dealing with violence after somebody has gone through a difficult situation and needs support. It's that kind of holistic approach that I think we need, and we actually don't see as much as we need to in Canada. We know that this violence is very widespread. Forms of gender-based violence include things like intimate partner violence, sexual assault, sexual harassment, criminal harassment, and stalking. And over the last little while, we've been learning and talking a lot about these different forms of violence and what we need to do uniquely for each form of violence to address it. So I want to encourage you, if you are able to give right now, you can go to our website, canadianwomen.org, and we're running a campaign to fundraise for our Out of Violence Fund. And know that this will go to many programs and services in every province and territory of Canada doing something to address gender-based violence. I also want to encourage you to take a look at our Tireless Readers Collective. We are going to do more reads, great reads like this one that we just read today. And we also have a great writer coming up next year, actually. Oh, yes, there she is, Harriet. Harriet Lai, her book is just a beautiful book called Natural Killer. We just got word about it. It's going to be launched very soon. And it's a really beautiful memoir. Again, we have a lot of great memoirs coming up. And this is one where I think you'll be really interested in learning about her journey, experiencing a really rare form of leukemia, and trying to go through that, live through that, become an adult, get into a parenthood life, and just what that meant for her. And I think it will be a really interesting read. So I want to encourage you to keep track on our website, and we'll definitely post information about it here so that you can get access to that and join us for this great read and this great author. And folks, as we close off, I want to encourage you to know about the signal for help. This is something that we've been encouraging people to know about. It's something that you might see on a video call, and it's just a simple one-handed signal that anybody can do to say, I need you to check in with me. I need you to find out if I need your support. And it's a way of saying you need help without leaving a digital trace, especially if somebody might be listening in, if somebody might be, making you unsafe at home at this time when people are using video calls and they might be isolated much more in the pandemic context. This could be a useful tool that somebody would want to use. So I'm going to close off with a little video that we have about the signal for help so you understand what it is. And to find out more about the signal and what you can do to respond if you see it, you can go to our website, canadianwomen.org, and find out more about that. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for reading with us, and have a great rest of the night. Really appreciate you folks. Bye.
Can you share that banana bread recipe?
Sure. It's actually my mom's banana bread recipe, but it's pretty foolproof and super easy.
Well, I really appreciate it. I know your mom's a great baker, so it should be good.